So this is a fun clip of Jordan Peterson in conversation with Mohammed Hijab, where Mohammed's making the case, and he's very much an Islamist, by the way, Mohammed, very anti-Israel, by the way, obviously, the two go hand in hand. And he's making the case that the expansion of the first Islamic caliphate is proof of the truth of Islam. Jordan Peterson responds by saying, but then why did the expansion stop and eventually contract? As is the case of every single other empire in history. Have a watch of their conversation, then I want to expand on some of these theological remarks and give you a Jewish perspective on them. Have a watch.
You know, there was one war in particular where they were starving, and it's called Khandaq, and he hit a rock and he said, Futihat Rum, the Roman Empire has been conquered. He hit a rock again, he said, Futihat Faris, that the Persian Empire has been conquered. And then he knocked the rock again, he said this in his weakest moment. He said that the Yemen has been conquered. I see that the expansion of the Islamic Empire is a proof for Islam. And you know, it's not just me. Even historians say this. Barnaby Rogerson, he said the fact that Islam spread to the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire is equivalent to is equivalent to Eskimos taking over Russia and America. I believe it's miraculous, if anything, that this happened. I don't think it's unjustifiable. I think actually, Jordan Peterson, to be
then
completely
why
honest
did
with
it
you,
stop at Europe's borders, so to speak? If it was a miraculous expansion,
yeah, it stopped out because of it wasn't successful there. It wasn't. It stopped where it couldn't go further. But the point is that it's not like the Christians at that time in Rome cared. I mean, they did the same thing for years. They were expanding themselves.
Well, that's why I said I wasn't making a prima facie case that this was wrong. I'm trying to understand it. And you objected to my use of the term warlord, and perhaps rightly so. You know, perhaps that was an injudicious comment. I was rather shocked when I was reading Islamic history when I encountered the degree of violence that surrounded these events. And so, you know, maybe I was
I appreciate what you said there. I think that shows real sincerity, and it's one step closer to creating real meaningful relationships between
I think and I think your defense that, well, the world was a battleground of empires, and you know, if it's push out from our territory or be encroached upon and dominated, then it isn't obvious that being encroached upon and dominated is the right approach, the correct approach, the most moral approach, let's say, especially because there'd be no shortage of bloodshed that would also accompany that. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you're in a bad place, but you know, it's not an easy thing for any of us to, what would you say, mediate between doctrines like turn the other cheek and love your enemy, and also at the same time discuss the necessity of both defensive and sometimes expansionist wars. Right? We all have to contend with that, and it's very difficult to contend with it. The arguments are extremely complicated.
You're absolutely right. And I think what's really important here, because I think this is a huge misconception, is to outline, because I know you're against totalitarianism. You're very, vocal.
I'm going to stop the clip here, actually, because they get into a whole separate discussion. But I want to touch now on what he's saying. Two arguments. Number one is argument that the vast expansion of Islam under the Caliphate in the 7th century is evidence, proof of the truth of Islam. And then secondly, they're talking about the morality of it. And Mohammed is saying, well, look, this is just the way empires fought and grew and the way the world was, so to speak, back in the day. So let me touch on both of those arguments. First of all, the one about does the expansion prove anything? As Jordan rightly pointed out in his rebuttal, lots of empires expand and then contract. Same is the case with the Caliphate. Why does that prove anything? Okay, you're saying the speed at which it expanded and contracted. I could point you towards lots of military miracles, things where the odds were stacked against them. I don't think this idea of empires expanding or contracting is much of a proof. And the fact is also that when it comes to Christianity and Islam, they're pretty equal competitors for the ways in which things have spread or not spread. I would make the case, actually, that, look, neither of those has become the dominant one. Neither has won out. And actually, what I find much more of a miraculous, much more of a sign of divine manifestation. So when you look at the story of the Jewish people, where, to quote Mark Twain, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans, All the great empires of history have risen and fallen, and the Jew, despite having his hands tied behind his backs throughout most of his history, having been intensely persecuted, scattered all over the world, few in number, has seen them all and beat them all and survived and thrived despite all of that. They're coming and going. The fact that the Jewish people have survived against all the odds. You want to talk about military victory in battles. The fact that Israel has survived, and this gets the Islamic and Islamist world so frustrated, so upset, because it's so threatening to their view that Islam is the new chosen religion of God. And they look at Israel, and for as long as the Jews are scattered the world, they're like, yeah, they're just the wandering cursed Jew rejected by God. When they return to their sovereign land and have Arab armies 10 times their size coming after them, and Israel survives despite all that and thrives more so than every other country in the Middle East. Goodness me, what does that do to our Islamist worldview? But also, how can you not look at that as being the manifestation of the divine? So I think that's a huge part of what gives me confidence. You want to talk about proofs. Also, the fact is that the Bible, the Torah, prophesied all these things. God said, I will scatter you among the nations. You'll be few in number among those nations. You'll be intensely persecuted, all those things. And then I'll gather you in at the end of the days. I'll restore you to your land. The land will flourish once again. You want to talk about against all the odds. Look at that. That's the one thing that has been consistent. The Islamic Caliphate came and it went, expands, contracts. The Jewish people has survived and maintained its identity, its values, traditions, beliefs. It's God. But then there's also the question around strategy. What is the right strategy for just war versus, as Jordan says, turn the other cheek? Well, yes, the Jews may have survived, but actually we have dramatically transformed the world's values in the process as well. The majority of the world worships the God of Abraham. That was introduced by the Jewish people. The values of all human life having sacred value, world peace as an ideal, justice and equality before the law, social responsibilities of the poor and the needy were first articulated by the Hebrew Bible. Jewish people have transformed the world. But here's the interesting thing. It seems like there's a place for war. There's a place for the need to have one's own land and homeland and territory. There's definitely a place for that. There's also a belief that if you really believe that you have the truth, Judaism does want to see the whole world acknowledge the truth of the God of Israel. But it doesn't do that through empires, through trying to expand land and fight and destroy everyone in its wake. It believes in a homeland. We need a home. Absolutely, we need a home. And that's where you have just wars to protect yourself, defend yourself. Have a society in which you can practice those values. But how are those values then expanded upon? There's an idea that actually the exile of the Jews that occurred 2,000 years ago when we were scattered all over the world, forcibly displaced from our land by the Roman Empire, there's an idea that that was actually a form of the Jewish people being able to colonize the world, not through might and political power, but through our ideas. See, the Jewish view of transforming the world's values and bringing it closer to goodness, to truth, to godliness is not through the idea of power, it's through the power of ideas, to quote the late, great Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. It is, frankly, almost childish to think that the way you get humanity on board with the truth and with goodness and godliness is through force. We're told that we're actually on the brink of celebrating the Jewish holiday of Purim, where the Jewish people were threatened with genocide, and they chose, despite not seeing the hand of God in this world, they chose to re-accept the Torah, but this time it was done with love. But we're told at Mount Sinai, the first time they accepted the Torah, it was done out of fear, because it was like God was, the Talmudic commentaries explain it was like God was literally holding the mountain over our heads and saying, you accept this Torah or you're going to die. It's metaphorical, but it's effectively saying, what were we supposed to do? We're stood at Mount Sinai, God is coming down from heaven to earth, And he's saying, I'm the Lord your God. Will you accept my Torah? What else are you going to say other than yes? It's sort of saying, it's like we didn't really have much of a choice. But on Purim, God's face was hidden. It looked like it was very bad to be a Jew, very difficult to be a Jew. But we turned to him and extended our arm back to him. We chose him. And that was a much higher level of accepting the Torah. It was out of love, not fear. And what's that coming to teach us? It's coming to teach us something very profound. That ultimately you cannot impose truth by force. A teacher may well need respect in a classroom, a parent too at home. But if you want to really get someone on board, threatening and intimidation that's ultimately for children. That's just getting people there. In order to really let them develop it, it has to be through choice. And the only way you get it to happen through choice, for people to make the right decisions by choice and learn to love something by choice, is through education, through teaching of ideas. And that's what this channel's all about. JTV is all about that. That is the tagline of our channel, Jewish Ideas, Global Relevance. That has been our motto, because that is the way that we change the world. Yes, we need our homeland, and yes, we fight for that. But beyond that, we change it through setting an example to the world and teaching the power of God's ideas. Ideas are more powerful than the sword. People will die for ideas. So the key thing here is that our strength actually lies in our education and ability to model and articulate the vision that God has for the world in which he wishes to dwell in. That's the Jewish way. It served us very well. It served the world well. And we have more to do.
Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.